So, oh boy, winter was horrible for the Americans. Disease, hypothermia, horrible conditions. No matter where they went, it was terrible. The Americans spent two winters in Morristown, New Jersey. Yes, New Jersey once again is a crossroad of the American Revolution. More action will take place in our state than any other during the war. He goes to Morristown because there's a lot of geographic advantages. If you go where Washington had his encampment, you can see that they have a clear view on a great day of parts of New York and parts of Philadelphia with a telescope, so he could keep an eye on where the British had their fortresses. Remember, both Philadelphia and New York City are occupied during this time period. So it's a place that he can keep an eye on things, but it's essentially on top of a mountain. And if you go into the winters of from the 1760s through like the early 1800s in the United States, they were brutal. It was like a mini ice age, long, brutal winters. And in this winter, where in 1780 in particular, where they had over 20 blizzards, 20 blizzards. Think of like how many days school can be shut down for one blizzard. 20 blizzards during the course of that. His troops, many of them didn't have housing, didn't have shoes, but even worse than the cold was the smallpox. Smallpox is a virus that infects and causes a horrible fever and also causes blisters to open up all over your body, on your skin, in your mouth, in your throat, and the fever and the blisters inside of your mouth and throat could actually suffocate you, and it causes a great deal of death. More troops in America will die from smallpox and starvation than anything else. Another big problem that they faced was in the winter of 1778, and that was in Valley Forge, Pennsylvania. He figured, all right, instead of going on top of a mountain where we're going to get lots of storms, we'll take a valley in between the mountains. Well, this valley that they chose didn't have a lot of trees, so they really have very little housing. He sends 12,000 soldiers, with 1 in 3 without shoes, most of them without shelter. It's not until February of that year that they have supplies. They have lack of food resources. They make something called fire cake, which is like really like brick-like pancakes made out of like old flour, and pepper soup, which is, you know, like black pepper that you use for seasoning your food. Hot boiling water with black pepper. Yep, that's pepper soup. And that was the food they had. It was really rough, but even more terrible than that was their sanitation led to even more disease for the Americans. In particular, cholera. Diseases that can be spread from bad sanitation. They put where they kept their food supplies next to where their latrines were, where they went to the bathroom. So a lot of their food was contaminated. And if you get these diseases, you essentially, you know, have a very horrible death. Very painful death from digestive issues, let's say. And but this all will change when this guy will come into the American camp. And that's a guy by the name of Baron von Steuben. Baron von Steuben is a general from Prussia, which is part of Germany. He was an accomplished drill master, which is kind of like a drill master, training soldiers in his country of Prussia. Prussia had one of the best militaries, well-trained and organized militaries in the world during this time period. And he had to flee his home country because he was outed for his sexuality. He was gay. And he went to France thinking he might have a safe place there. The French turned him away. But when he's there, he runs into Benjamin Franklin. Franklin's like, hey, dude, von Steuben, we could use somebody like you who knows how to train troops. Our army doesn't know what they're doing. They're farmers. So he gives this handwritten note to him. He says, "Find George Washington, give this to him. He'll see that I sent you. He'll know you're all right." He sends von Steuben to America. The guy knows maybe 10 words of English, and 8 of them are curses. And he sends them to Washington. Washington puts him right to work in Valley Forge, where he trains and drills and drills and drills and takes this army that was of broken, cold, frostbitten, sick guys and turns them into a professional army. And when the spring comes, these dudes are hardened, they're ready, and they're resolved. They can take the winters in Morristown and the winters in Valley Forge. They can take anything that the British would throw at them. And here you see some renderings of how terrible it was in Valley Forge. Of course, you see Washington here talking to von Steuben. The snow around Valley Forge was red from the frozen feet of the soldiers. So many of them had frostbite, where their feet were frozen and bleeding and cracked, and their blood vessels were dying. So it was a rough scene there. Sorry to scare you with that one. So, 2 questions for you. One from part 1, one from part 2. 1, should Benedict Arnold be more remembered for his heroism at the Battle of Saratoga? Remember, without Saratoga, we don't win the war. Or should he be more remembered for his treachery, for being a traitor to the American cause, for his name becoming synonymous with betrayal? Which was more significant in his life, his heroism or his treachery? Number 2, I want you to name one of the difficulties faced at the winter encampments, and what was one positive impact that it had on them. All right, that wraps up this lesson. See you back tomorrow, where we're going to wrap up the war with the battles of Monmouth and Yorktown.